Year like no other for students receiving their A-level results, the government reversing its decision to use grades calculated by an algorithm.
Grades decided by teacher assessment, centrally assessed, will now be awarded to students in England instead. It's welcome news to many, but some pupils are now facing more uncertainty than before. Let's speak to Dan Johnson, who's at Leyton Sixth Form College in London and can run us through how things are working there. Morning to you, Dan.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, a welcome U-turn, I think, but it doesn't solve everything. In fact, probably raises more questions than it answers, the government's decision yesterday, because students now face an even more complicated set of options, and universities face the job of trying to sort all this out. Well, this was one of the colleges that was disproportionately affected by the results last week. Gill is the principal here. How badly were your students affected, Gill?
Really badly. About 47% of the grades for A-levels were downgraded, so lower than the central assessed grades that we'd submitted.
Do you understand how that happened? Were you expecting that? Were you shocked by the results?
Shocked, yeah. I mean, we didn't have all the information about the algorithm that OfQual used initially, so we did assume that the central assessed grades that we submitted would form an important part of the process, if not be the sole determinant of the grades that were given. Once it became clear that wasn't the case, I was very apprehensive about the results on Thursday, knowing that they were likely not to be the results that we were expecting.
So do you think this was the right move?
I think in the circumstances it was the right move, but it's not an ideal solution, not least because a lot of the central assessed grades, so the grades that we gave, were not the grades that we necessarily hoped our students would get, but we knew that we were going to be constrained by our historical data, so we had to make those grades fit. So I imagine there are still a lot of students who are disappointed by their grades, and now in a sense they're the grades that we've given them, and therefore are feeling let down as much by their school or college as they are by the government. It is a really, really complicated situation.
What do you think about the way it's all been handled then?
I think it's been hugely stressful. We knew this situation in March. I'm sure there was already a contingency plan somewhere, and if there wasn't, there should have been, about what happens if public exams get cancelled. We've had months to sort this out. We had the example of what happened in Scotland, and yet we had a government saying there will be no U-turn. This is the situation, and this is where we are. And it's taken this long to make that decision. We knew it was coming. It should have happened much earlier. So students wouldn't be in this position where they're scrambling around now for university places, which, had they got the right results, would have been theirs.
Okay, thank you, Gill. We can talk to some of the students here this morning who are now weighing up their options. Aqsa, Wictoria and Nasirah, thank you for coming in early for us. Just lay out the sort of situation you guys are in after last week, and does yesterday's reversal make much of a difference for you, Aqsa?
In a sense it does, because originally they gave me a CBC, which obviously meant that I didn't get into my first choice uni, which was University College London, or second choice, which was Queen Mary, to study politics. But now, after the U-turn, I've got an AAB, which means I now can qualify to study the course I want, but it's not exactly at my first choice uni.
You still can't get into your first choice?
No, unfortunately not.
So what will you do now?
So now after this, I'm gonna go home, ring up the uni, just try and get into my course, because that's all I can do, really. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Wictoria?
So last week I got a BBC, and now my grades are ABB. So it doesn't really impact what I want to do in the future, as I still got into my foundation I did beforehand. However, I'm thinking of repeating the year in order to get an A in arts, as I don't think that I deserve a B, and I feel like had we been able to sit the exams and had I been able to finish my sketchbook and finish the course, I would have gotten an A, maybe even an A-star.
So you're still thinking of resitting the year?
Yes.
Setting yourself back a year just to make sure that this is sorted out?
Yeah, because I know what I'm capable of had the pandemic never happened, and if I have to resit the year and have to, be set back a year, then that's fine, as long as I get the grades that I truly deserve.
What do you think about the fact you've been left in that situation?
I feel like it's very unfair because, the pandemic, it was no one's fault, and it's very unfair that now I have to deal with the situation, have to sort of figure out a way on my own to sort this out, and that the government isn't supporting the students to sort it out properly for everyone, that we have to sort of make sacrifices on our own behalf to sort this out properly.
What about you, Nasirah?
Well, I 100% agree with what Wictoria was saying, because I'm in a similar situation as her. I applied for university, and I wanted to go to King's College London in order to do digital culture, but the grades that I received was ABD, which was nowhere near the entry requirement. Because of today, I found out now that I'm able to get 2 A-stars and a D, which still isn't necessarily what I need in order to go to King's College London. However, I was able to secure my insurance on results day, so I'm very happy with that. to go to Goldsmiths to do journalism, but I still feel like grades and exams aren't necessarily just to get into university. They're something personal, and I really do value my grades and my academics. So for me, I will be resetting maths, which I got a D in, because I know I am capable of doing much more.
Okay, thank you all. We appreciate you giving us your time this morning. As you're hearing, yesterday's U-turn hasn't really simplified things, certainly not for these guys. Anyway, well, let's look ahead to Thursday and GCSEs, because Paul runs the transition, that's the word, for students. You're at the school down the road, the students who may be coming here after their results on Thursday. What do you think about the way things are looking for them?
Well, obviously a lot better than what it was over a week ago, because hopefully the girls at our school will be able to take the subjects that they were predicted, and that makes a massive difference. Obviously, I think it's been if you look at a couple of weeks ago, obviously students were prepared to protest and take to the streets up in Scotland. Actually, were really serious, just like you've heard from the girls and from Gill, about their future, and that's right that they've done that, actually, because it heaped the pressure on the government, and the government have had to do the U-turn. What I obviously am worried about as well is not just after Thursday, but also for next year, because you see you've got the year 10s coming into year 11s, and as someone who has to deliver careers, want to know, really have confidence in the government that they know what they're doing for the future as well. Our students and the students you've heard from there and from Gill, we're all very serious about young people's futures, and we want clarity about what's taking place, not just for now, but also into the near future.
Give us a quick review of the way the government's handled this then, and what do you think of the Education Secretary's future?
I mean, on a personal level, obviously, I think it's shambolic. I think it's been really, really poor. There has been, as Gill quite rightly said, there's been a long period of time to get this one right, and I don't think it's been good enough. And as I said, we really want to have a level of confidence in the people opposed. And actually, that's what students want as well. That is why they are so desperate about their future, because they want people in authority to be clear about the direction in which they go in. They want to have faith in what we do.
Okay, thank you all. We really appreciate your time this morning. As you're hearing, not a lot of faith in the system after this fiasco. We'll see exactly what happens with GCSE results on Thursday, but for A-level students who are now considering what to do in terms of the next move, there are some really serious questions about what universities are going to do in terms of reallocating places, whether they'll actually be able to take everybody, and if they do honour all their offers, where will they put everyone at a time when universities are supposed to be enforcing social distancing because of the virus? All sorts up in the air all over again.
Thank you for that, Dan. A really clear picture of some of the concerns that many students are feeling this morning.
Yeah, and much of the anger and frustration has been directed at the use of this algorithm to decide which grades to award to students.
You'll know, won't you, that it led to around 40% of A-level results being downgraded from the grades set by the teacher assessments. Well, the regulator OfQual has now apologised to some of the students affected.
I'd like to say sorry. We have recognised the difficulty that young people have faced coping with the receipt of grades that they were unable to understand the basis on which they had been awarded, and I would like to say sorry for that, and we are now taking steps to put that right.
So that's the statement that came from OfQual yesterday. Let's speak to the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, Geoff Barton. Good morning to you, Geoff. Good to see you on the programme again. We'll be speaking to the Education Secretary in about 10 minutes' time. From your perspective, and those I'm sure you've been in conversation with in the last 24 hours, where does the finger of blame need to be pointed here? Does it land with OfQual, or is it with Gavin Williamson and his team?
Well, Dan, I think the first thing we would just acknowledge is, on behalf of young people, at least a decision has been made which is in their interest. It's not perfect, and you can hear from the people you've been talking to that head teachers are not hanging out the bunting this morning, because actually there are more problems ahead. In terms of blame, I think there's two issues here. One is the technical issue. OfQual is a regulator. It's supposed to ensure standards between schools and between years, and I think, to its credit, I suppose, yesterday it acknowledged it had failed to do that. But of course, there's a political dimension as well. Exam results in this country are used partly to judge children, partly to judge teachers, partly to judge the performance of schools, and partly to say to taxpayers, how well is this country doing? And therefore, you would want a Department for Education to be asking some pretty probing questions on something that matters so much in such an exceptional time about, can we be reassured that this process is going to work? And it's looking to all of us, I suspect, probably including the Secretary of State.
I know you were listening.
Weren't asked early on.
Sorry about that, Geoff. I thought you'd finished, but it was actually a slight technical jump on your line. Can I ask you, because I know you listened to those students there we were speaking to with Dan at the Sixth Form College in London, and you can see in their reaction, I suppose that's a microcosm of what's happening right across the United Kingdom. There's relief for some, but for many that decision has come too late, and they now find themselves in a really difficult decision to know what to do next.
That's absolutely right. And the school leaders, the teachers who are going to be scrambling to be in school to respond to some of those questions, which will now come up today, 5 days on from the results, are also in a position where there are things that they don't know about. There will be young people who didn't get into their first place university last week. Maybe they did or didn't get into their second place. They're now going to be saying, well, I've got the grades I could have got into the first place. And even though we recognise the Secretary of State has lifted the cap, there are some courses, maybe medicine, for example, where because of facilities, because of the number of staff, because of social distancing, the idea that you can now start to fill up with more young people is probably going to be impossible. So there are going to be a lot of people who will continue to be unhappy and disappointed today. And our school leaders, the people I represent, will do everything they can to help them. And I know Universities UK, the whole university system, will be doing the same.
Yeah, but interesting to hear the Education Secretary's thoughts on that in a few moments' time on breakfast. What about the reaction from college leaders? Because we mentioned the fact that this algorithm has been used, and I was watching quite a few teachers reacting to the news over the last few days, talking about the fact that their assessments were sort of taken out and replaced by a computer. Now we're going back to those centrally assessed grades for A-levels and for GCSEs. What is the feeling amongst the profession at the moment?
It's interesting that the majority of emails I've had representing 20,000 heads and deputies has actually been quite a gloomy one. And the reason for that is there were always two parts to this. There's the bit we needed to do in our schools, and you use the right terminology there, centre-assessed grades. This is not about your individual teacher sticking the finger in the air saying, well, I think she probably feels like a C on a good day. This was, say, in the school I used to run, 350 Year 11 students, making sure that my responsibility with the students I taught was to decide their grades and rank order them, but to do that across the whole centre. That was a rigorous process, much more robust than is sometimes being caricatured in the media, I think. And I think leaders will be thinking today, well, hang on, we did our bit. We then in good faith handed it over to this statistical model which had all the secrecy of the Da Vinci Code. Why didn't they do the bit that they should be doing? Because what we can say today is if you get a grade A from teacher A in your school, it'll be the same as a grade A from teacher B. But the bit that should then have happened is to make sure we've got standards between and across schools and across years. And that's the thing where OfQual has not been able to deliver this week.
And so from those emails and that correspondence you've been receiving then, do you think there is a sense of anger at the way that this has been played out?
Well, there's a mixed emotion. Partly there is a sense of weariness that here we are again as leaders, people who are generally control freaks and who hate the fact that they're now on the back foot, that when young people were coming in, even yesterday, saying, so what's the appeals process with the mock results? They just had to say, I don't know, because of what happened over the weekend. So you've got that sense of weariness and frustration. I think probably you've also got a sense of at least we've got some clarity. And I think what they'd be saying is, can we have that clarity into next year? It would be really helpful, for example, if the Secretary of State was to agree with us that the most important thing when we bring young people back into schools and colleges fully in September is that teachers are allowed just to get on with assess their young people, to teach those young people, and not think that at the end of next year we're going to have performance tables ranking schools in extraordinary times and some of my members, leaders, on the front of the local paper being branded the worst school in Britain. We could clear that stuff away, and it would be a sign of an Education Secretary this morning, I think, recognising that we now have to get all of this fiasco behind us and get back to teaching young people in the classroom where they belong.
Geoff, the students we've just been speaking to are A-level students, but there's been a lot of attention now in the last 24 hours about GCSE results coming out on Thursday. Do you think that this decision has at least taken away a bit of the stress and anxiety that was surrounding those results this week?
I think it has. I think we have to acknowledge there are BTEC students as well who are left in limbo because we need the same process to apply to that vocational course today. But in terms of GCSE, yes, it's going to bring more clarity to that. Of course, what it will mean, I think, is that more young people are now going to be eligible to go into a sixth form that perhaps they hadn't thought they were going to go into, or into a different college from there. So that is going to raise questions about capacity for them, and our leaders have got a pretty short amount of time to respond to that. But at least we know before those results are going to the young people what that might look like, and we can do some modelling, and leaders like to be in charge of their own destinies.
Geoff Barton, General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, always good to have you on the programme. Thank you very much for that. And it's a really good point about BTECs. I know lots of people have been contacting us about that, and that's something we'll ask Gavin Williamson about.
We will indeed. You are watching Breakfast, still to come on the programme. Do you trust your dog walker? We'll hear from a couple calling for better regulation of dog walkers, trainers and groomers after finding their pet had suffered abuse.
We'll look at that shortly, and we'll be bringing you the latest news, and we'll be joined by the Education